So let's talk about something a little bit interesting. Maybe you've thought about it, maybe you haven't. The crash and you. What does it mean? Let's find out next. Come on. Dave Edwards, Treasure Valley Dave here, and today I want to talk with you about the crash. We had a conversation recently in our office on this very subject and caused us all to think a little bit, and I kind of wanted to share that with you. But before we get started, if you're thinking about moving up here to the Treasure Valley area, we'd love to help you out. We have a lot of experience. We've all gone through the same relocation process ourselves, but we can't help you until you reach out to us. So go ahead and give us a phone call, send us a text. Whatever works best for you. Email's still good. I know it's a little old-fashioned, but so am I. So let's get into this. The crash. So we had this guy that said that, so he was looking at houses, sort of interested in moving up here. And he said that he had been talking with friends, and his friends are telling him, prices are starting to drop. They'll probably go more. And it's inevitable that there's an economic crash coming. It seemed like the wisest thing to do, according to his friends, was to wait. So let's just kind of explore this a little bit. With the economy, there's like 4 different possibilities that could happen, right? So things could get better. Things could stay about the same. Things could get a little bit worse. And then there's that thing that we all pick up on from, I guess, those movies on late night TV, the big crash. Is the economy going to stay about the same? No. I mean, it's really been changing certainly since January 20th. Is it going to get better? Here we are in October of 2021. I'm not going to say that it's probably going to get any better, and whatever it is. And is it going to stay the same? Well, not likely. So there's obviously some politics that come into what our economy is doing. And those two things do go together. Judging by the history of things that have happened with politics and with the economy, things are going to be changing in our economy. So is it going to get somewhat worse? Probably so. And just judging by the political steps that have happened and how that's impacted on the economy over history. Are we going to have a total crash? Whatever that looks like. Y2K, planes falling out of the sky and buildings just burning to the ground. And it's like, is that what's going to happen this time too? What does totally crash look like? And, what could you do about it? So does it look like 1939 depression? The pictures really made that to us, 90 years on, it was just like such a terrible thing. And it was a terrible thing, but not everybody was affected by it. There were people that got put into a place, or they were in a place where the depression was really, really terrible, like farmers in the Midwest, Oklahoma, the Okies, and they traveled across the country for a better life in California. But not everybody was affected by the depression, maybe 20-25%. If you had money during the depression, it was actually a good thing because we had deflation. There was less money in our money supply. So that made every dollar you had actually worth more. So if you had money then, it was an okay thing. It wasn't nice that, your brethren were out there in the soup lines and couldn't get work and things like that. But it was not a total crash. The 2008 crash, there again, there's people that it did not affect. If you were, case in point for me, we had bought our house before then. We had our payment. It was set. We had a job. And the crash happened. Then the prices came back. It didn't really affect at all because the change in the price only really affects if you're buying or selling. And we weren't selling and we weren't buying because we'd already bought and we were in it for the long term. So I guess that's just a tangent, difference between gambling and investing. We're in it for the long term. We bought it. We're staying in it. And it doesn't really matter what the short-term increases and decreases are. But if we were in it for like 6 months or a year, then it becomes more like gambling. We're kind of speculating that values are going to go up, and we were investors. We're not gamblers. So what does getting somewhat worse? Let's say that that's probably what's going to happen. Things are going to get somewhat worse. And what does that look like? What does that mean? It's, well, obviously inflation. We've seen inflation going on already. First thing was, in January, price of gasoline just about doubled. And everything that you have just about came to you on a truck, which means it took fuel to get there. So their fuel goes up, prices of everything else has to go up. Price of everything else goes up. That kind of puts pressure on your wages to go up. And voila, there we have inflation. What are traditionally some of the ways that government combats inflation? Well, if you can remember back to Reagan in the 80s, interest rates were over 21%. Reagan had the idea that we could get inflation under control. And so the inflation from the 70s, Jimmy Carter era, pushed up interest rates. That's how they were combating inflation, and that even carried on into Reagan's time. And it was sky-high interest rates to combat inflation, and it eventually worked. So because it does work, that's obviously a tool that the powers that be will, once they become more responsible for the care of the country, they could, start jacking up interest rates to get inflation under control. Housing costs are going to go up. Again, that's kind of dovetails with inflation. Everything's going up. Why not housing costs? Another thing that kind of impacts housing costs is the demand. And so we have, your normal demand, and then we have kind of what we've seen going on here. Well, I saw it back in 2012. Maybe you're just now waking up to it, but there's places that are better to live and places are not as good to live. So that creates demand, like here. What could you do? So things are going to get somewhat worse. Inflation's one of those things. Higher interest rates are one of those things. What could you do to kind of prepare or mitigate those things? One is that you could put your money into something that will go up with inflation, that will keep up. It's not that it's gaining in or more value. It's just that as dollars become less, it looks like you have more dollars or more value, but it's just keeping up with inflation. One thing that you could do is get a mortgage with a fixed rate. And so what does that do? Well, let's say you buy a house and you get a mortgage. Well, I'll give you an example. My aunt bought their house early 70s. They had a mortgage of under $200, and I was just buying my house in the mid 80s, and I had assumed an interest rate of 13.5, and my payment was just like so incredibly high, and hers was so incredibly low that she had bought, just 15 years earlier, if even that much. But her payment, was a normal payment back then. Fast forward, all that inflation. Now it's like, $1,200, $1,500 was a normal payment. And that's the power. She was still paying $200 for a really nice house, and I was paying a whole lot more for a lot less house. So she locked in that low payment, even though inflation had gone up. And now her payment looked like, it's like absolutely fantastic because it's such a small payment. The payment doesn't go up. The principal and the interest does not go up because it's locked in. That's one way that you can kind of combat inflation. And what are you going to buy? Well, you could buy your personal residence. That would be a great place. I mean, obviously you need someplace to live. If you're renting, your rent's probably going to go up with inflation. Housing costs go up. Everything else is going up. If you're renting, your rent's going to be going up. On the other hand, if you have a place, then you're locking in those payments. But let's say that you're in a position too to maybe also buy a rental. Then the same thing applies. You get your payment, it's locked in, that expense your principal and interest is going to be the same for, let's say it's a 30-year note. For the next 30 years, you know exactly what that's going to be. You fast forward, inflation's kicked in, and now your fixed portion of the expense for your payment looks really small because rents have gone up with everything else. We said inflation is making prices of everything go up, rents as well. Another thing that is going to be making your rental prices go up is demand. You have to throw into the mix the unknown of the political angle. Will people continue to escape their Marxist states and move to places like the Treasure Valley here? And that's what I did. A lot of people are doing it because, not that they don't want to stay and fight, but there's a point where you just want to stop beating your head against the wall. You're just not going to beat the system. Is Idaho going to become a Marxist state? I don't know. But I can tell you, there's a lot of Californians that know exactly what Marxism looks like, and they've come up here and they're not putting up with it. They're getting actively involved. They are making sure that we get back to more freedom-minded way of thinking and holding politicians accountable to that. Another variable is the national government. Is it going to become like what happened in Russia in 1917? It doesn't matter what state you're in. The whole federal government is going to take over everything and then inflict whatever it is they're going to inflict. And that kind of brings us to this. What can we do to mitigate these different things that might be coming in our future? So if things are going to get somewhat worse, what we can do to mitigate that is, combat inflation by buying a house, getting that mortgage payment locked in, maybe buying a rental if that's something that you can do. So my suggestion is to, mitigate for things that are going to get somewhat worse. And then once they start turning around and even getting better, then you're that much further ahead. The future is up to you. Talk with your friends, but think for yourself. And of course, if what you come up with is moving to Idaho, buying a place, please reach out to us. Like I say, we can't help you unless you raise your hand and say, hey, Treasure Valley Dave team, I need some answers, questions answered. I need some help. We want to come visit you. Check it out and see what it's all about. Give us a call, text, email, whatever it takes. If you found this video interesting, helpful, if you know someone that might get something from it, please go ahead and share it, like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one that comes out. And as always, this is Treasure Valley Dave, looking forward to helping you get home